Vanakkam. Hello friends. In the previous episode, we saw the heroics of the Chola king Chetchenni Nalam Killi. He was the son of Karikala the Great. In this episode, we continue with the line of the early Cholas and move on to the rule of Killi Valavan, who represented the 8th generation of the early Cholas, presumably the son of Nalam Killi. Both Killi and Valavan being general epithets that were used to describe the Chola kings, this king was posthumously awarded the title Kulamutrathu Tunjiya Killi Valavan, the king who died at Kulamutram. K. N. Sivarajapillai, in his The Chronology of the Early Tamils, puts down the rule of this king to between 125 and 150 Common Era. In his patronage of poets, Killi Valavan seems to have surpassed not only those of his forefathers, but those of the kings in other lineages as well, as not less than 10 Sangam poets have sung his praise. They added to the brilliance of his court, and from their poems, we recreate details of the valor, courage, and magnanimity of the great Killi Valavan. Being the grandson of Karigala the Great, he proved himself a worthy successor and took war right to the gates of the Chera capital of Karur. He is reported to have laid siege to the fortress of Karur with the Chera king inside, and this situation is described in a poem by Alattur Kirar, who comes across as an important link poet, as he has also sung the praises of Nalam Killi, the predecessor of Killi Valavan. In Purananuru poem 36 that begins, Adunanayayinum, Vidunanayayinum, Ni Alandu Aridi Nin Puraimai. The poet admonishes Killi Valavan saying, whether you want to kill him or whether you want to let him go, you yourself should judge and understand what will bring your lineage renown. காவுதொறும் கடிமறந்து அடியும் ஓசை தன்னூர் நெடுமதில் வரைப்பிற் கடிமனை எம்ப ஆங்கி இனிதிருந்த வேந்தனோடு ஈங்கனின் சிலைத்தார் முரசங்கரங்க மலைத்தனை என்பது நானு தகை உடைத்து. Continues the poet. Hearing the sound of the felling of the royal trees in the forest by the sharp axes of your blacksmiths, he hides inside the palace within his fortress walls. Oh, he is such a coward. He has not the power to oppose his enemies. O Killi Valava, wearing victorious garlands and sounding your victorious Murasu drums, going to war with such a coward is an act of shame. It would seem that Alattur Kirar was appealing to the better senses of Killi Valavan, and here the intent seemed to be to protect the city of Karur from destruction. But his appeals seem to have fallen on deaf ears, going by the references found in the poems of a few contemporary poets that record how Killi Valavan vanquished the Chera capital. In a passing reference, Mamulanar sings these verses in Nattinai poem 14, where the setting is an aham setting, and the words go, Tolkavin Tolaya Tolnalam Saai, Malhar Nitarar Ayinum Nalguvar, Nattanar Vali Tori, Kuttuvan Ahappa Adiya Nuri, Sembian Pahalti Veta Nyatpinum Mihaperidu. The situation is where the heroine is in severe distress as the hero has been long separated from her. Here she is trying to convince her Tori, her confidant, that the hero will be coming back very soon. But in the meantime, her distress due to this separation has become the talk of the town, just as how the act of Sembian, here meaning Killi Valavan, burning the fortress walls of the Chera capital in broad daylight was the talk of the town. So this is the kind of simile that Mamulanar draws, implying that both were despicable acts. Similarly, two poignant poems sung by the lady poetess Marokathu Nappasalayar in Purananuru also highlight the destruction of the Chera capital by Killi Valavan. Marutham being a small town near the Pandyan port city of Korkai, Nappasalayar sings in Puram 37, புல்லுரு புன்கண் தீர்த்த வெள்வேல் சினங்கெழுதானை செம்பியன் மருக. O heir of Champion, who removed the anguish of a dove and owned a rage-filled army with bright spears, you have the skill to ruin this ancient city with copper walls, where the Chera king with his decorated elephant hides behind his fortress that is surrounded by deep moats full of vicious crocodiles. O great leader, you are capable of destroying all this in battle without any consideration. Again, Nappasalayar continues in Purananuru poem 39 that begins, புறவின் அல்லல் சொல்லிய கரையடி யானை வான் மறுப்பு எரிந்த வெண்கடை கோல் நிறை துலாஅம் புக்கோன் மருக. O heir of Champion, who removed the pain of a dove by climbing on a scale with a pointer made of the elephant's tusk, generosity is not the reason for your fame. If we think about your ancestors who ruined forts that were difficult to approach, killing in battle is neither the reason for your fame. Righteousness has been established in the court of Urandai due to Chola's martial courage, and reigning with justice cannot increase your fame. O Valava, who wins battles with great might, who owns proud horses, how can I describe you, since you have made the strong fort of Karuvur wither, and by doing so have destroyed the Chera king, who had placed the protective bow symbol of the Cheras on the summit of the Himalayas. How can I sing your fame? She seems to imply that the act of Killi Valavan destroying Karuvur was not called forth for. The contemporary Chera king who suffered such ignominy at the hands of Killi Valavan was Yanikadchai Mandaran Cheral, Chera of the elephant look. He also seemed to have suffered defeat and imprisonment at the hands of the famous contemporary Pandya ruler Talayalanganathu Seruvendra Pandiyan Nedunjeliyan. What is interesting is that out of the 10 Sangam poets who sing the praise of this king, 4 contemporary poets mention the incident of the dove and the eagle, connecting the legend to the Chola lineage for the first time. And again, the title of Sembian, purportedly adopted from the Sibi lineage, is also used herein for the first time. It is in the Sivi Jataka, a Buddhist tale, that the story of the sparrow and the hawk appears. The Jataka tales are actually detailed episodes of the reincarnations of Lord Buddha, and each tale illustrates the Buddhist ideals of Dhamma and sacrifice. It is believed that the Buddha himself narrated many of these tales during his sermons across India to emphasize that by continuously practicing virtuous deeds, one reaches the state of nirvana or enlightenment. The story goes, as he sat in court one day, a sparrow flew into the king's palace and sat on his lap. The sparrow was being chased by a falcon. The falcon demanded the king to return the sparrow as it was his means of subsistence. But the king argued that any life that sought refuge with him was his subject in his kingdom and therefore worthy of his protection. But at the same time, realizing the falcon's rights, the king offered his own flesh in the place of the sparrow, thus fulfilling his duty to protect his subjects. Interestingly, this beautiful story gets incorporated in the Mahabharata, where the Sivi line or Sibi line is shown as a lunar dynasty ruling from Aritapura somewhere in western Rajasthan. The sparrow becomes a dove and the falcon becomes an eagle, but the plot remains the same. King Sibi's mother, Madhavi, is described as the daughter of King Yayati of the Chandravamsa, the lunar race. There is a beautiful stone panel from Gandhara dated to the 2nd century Common Era that depicts this story, and the panel itself lies now in the British Museum. Now, why would the poetess Nappasalayar impose this story on the Chola lineage and even modify the name of Sibi into Sembian, boldly claiming him to be Killi Valavan's ancestor? Ironically, P.T. Srinivasa Iyengar, in his book The History of the Tamils from the Earliest Times to 600 AD, shows how the same story of King Sibi is adapted in the Kambaramayana, composed by Kambar in the 12th century Common Era, and King Sibi is shown as the ancestor of King Rama, who represented the solar dynasty. Well, Sangam poems talk highly of the philanthropy of lesser hill chieftains, and amongst them the most famous being the Kadayelu Vallalgal, a few of whom we have seen in previous episodes. Their stories take the pride of place, with Pari parting his golden chariot to a crawling jasmine creeper and Vayavi Began offering his blanket to a shivering peacock in the Palani hills. These anecdotes caught the fancy of the people and were much talked about. Maybe Nappasalayar wanted such an anecdote that was praiseworthy of the Chola lineage. With the widespread influence of Buddhism at that time, Nappasalayar is sure to have taken her inspiration from the Jataka tale, lifting the story of Sibi and hoisting it on a Chola king. Or maybe she lifted it from the Mahabharata. She registers it strongly in both her Purananuru poems, recasting the family name of Sibi as Sembian. While it is very clear that King Sibi had nothing to do with the Chola dynasty, the story seems to have caught the fancy of many other poets through time, including the contemporary Sangam poets like Kovur Kilar and Mamulanar. Kovur Kilar, again an important link poet, having sung the praise of Nalam Killi, the predecessor of Killi Valavan, records an incident that throws light on the autocratic ways of these early kings. Killi Valavan defeated a small-time chieftain Malayaman, and upon vanquishing him, ordered that his young unoffending children be put to death. Kovur Kilar intervenes in this situation and sings Purananuru poem 46, where he appeals to Killi Valavan to refrain from engaging in this shameful act. Malayaman is considered a descendant of Malayaman Tirumudikkari, one of the Kadayelu Vallalgal, the last great 7 patrons, and the poem goes, Niye Puravin Allal Andriyum Piravum Idukkan Palavum Vidutton Marugane Ivare Pulan Urudu Unmar Punkananji Tamadu Pahuttu Unnum Tannilal Valnar Kaliru Kandu Aluvum Ara Al Maranda Puntalai Chira Mandru Marundu Noki Virindin Punkan Novudayar Ketanai Ayin Ni Vetadu Seime. You are not only the heir of the king who removed the anguish of a dove, but also removed the sorrow of many. They are descendants of the patron chief who, when seeing poverty, shared whatever was his and ate with others together. The young children who were incessantly crying on the loss of their father now stand terrified looking at the elephant that is being readied to stamp on them, and have gone into silence, seeing the court full of people looking at them. Kettadu ayin nee vettadu seme. I have said what I have to say. Now you do what you have to do. The poet's timely intervention not only saved Malayaman's children, but Killi Valavan also took them under his care. Of the contemporary chieftains who ruled at that time, such as Pittan Kottan of Gudiremalai and Adan Yelini, sung by Ayyur Mudavanar, the chieftain Sirugudi Kilan Pannan needs to be mentioned specially. Why? Killi Valavan himself renders a Purananuru poem in praise of this chieftain. Sirugudi, being a very small town on the banks of the river Kaveri in the Chola Empire, Killi Valavan seems to have been friends with Pannan, the ruler, and sings a poem in praise of his generosity and bravery. And Pannan indeed should have been famous in his own right, as he has been sung by several other poets including Kovur Kilar, Iyempon Sathan Kottanar, and Madurai Azhakkar Nyalar Mahanar Mallanar. And Purananuru poem 173 begin with the words, Yan Valum Nalum Pannan Valiya. May Pannan live for as long as I live. The king indeed was an enigma. On the one hand, he was ready to kill 2 innocent children of Malayaman, but on the other hand, he was so generous as to sing the praise of a contemporary smaller chieftain. Killi Valavan's role, coming as it did at the end of the 2nd century Common Era, was a time when the influence of the Vedic culture was taking its roots, and this is attested to in the very name of his successor, Rajasuyam Veta Perinar Killi, the great good Killi who did the Rajasuya Yaga, the great royal sacrifice that endowed the Kshatriya status on a royal lineage. K. N. Sivarajapillai, in fixing the time of these early rulers, also refers to the chronicles of the Greek and Roman travelers of that period. Three of them in particular were the Periplus of the Erythraean, the maritime records of a Greek sailor that recorded many South Indian ports and is dated to around 70 Common Era. The accounts of Pliny dated to around 78 Common Era, and that of Ptolemy dated to around 145 Common Era, making him a contemporary of Killi Valavan. And KNS shows how the accounts of Ptolemy coincide with the rule of Killi Valavan. We will continue with the exploration of the early triumvirate in the next episode. Vanakkam.